Welcome to Nonprofit Stories, inspiring tales from Silicon Valley. We will explore the transformative work of nonprofit organizations and leaders who are changing our community by tackling some of the most pressing issues facing Silicon Valley. So without further ado, let's dive into this exciting conversation. Today, we welcome Prudhvi Dharmana, the founder of ReWorld of Silicon Valley. They are committed to making biodiversity conservation accessible to everyone. They aim to achieve this by supporting the world's leading climate and conservation organizations. Before we dive into the conversation, let's learn a little about the organization's great work so far.
Hi, I'm Rosamira Guillen. I'm the Executive Director of Proyecto Titi. Cotton-top tamarins are one-pound monkeys that are only found in the tropical forests of northern Colombia. This little monkey is extremely endangered due mostly to extensive deforestation. Proyecto Titi is a nonprofit organization based here in Colombia, more than 5,000 hectares of protected areas, public protected areas, working with the environmental authorities. But we cannot do this ourselves. So we need to work with local communities, and that's why we have developed opportunities to engage them. So we're providing artisan work, the farmers engaging in our forest restoration world. Our partnership with ReWorld started when they approached us. ReWorld will provide reliable funding for hopefully the next 100 years so that we can guarantee a long-term future for cotton-top tamarins in their forest home.
Prudhvi, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me here.
So Prudhvi, give us a brief background of how it all started.
Yeah, so we started this in November 2021. I have started this with my co-founder, who is a VC venture capitalist. Both of us are long-term engineers in the Bay Area. We met over coffee discussing like an idea to essentially improve the biodiversity hotspots of the world. The problem we started initially with is there are a lot of very well-run nonprofit organizations in the world which protect the planet at a very local level, but they don't get the necessary funding that's needed. And we want to create a technology platform which solves this problem in like a very simple idea, like you go to a map, select your acres of the forest, you know exactly where you're selecting, and you click to preserve it for the next 20 years. There are a lot of things that are here, and we come with a unique economic model here. The problem with a lot of times nonprofits is you go and donate money, but the next year you come back and be like, I have to again give money to maintain the forest. I have to again give money to maintain the forest the next year. So we thought of using the carbon credits model here, where the nonprofit will reforest the land. They'll get carbon credits from it. And when you sell the carbon credits, the money will be used for maintaining the forest for the next 20 years. So when you go click an acre, purchase it, name it after yourself, right? So that is also preserved for the next 20 years. So that's where we started. We were like, okay, this is an amazing idea. This can go expand, and we can go and expand and accelerate the nonprofits of the world. We solve the funding problem because now everyone will get to know about it. With this, we started with working over it for like 1 year in stealth, essentially. Even though it's a nonprofit, we started this like a startup, and we launched this in November 2021. And in this 6 months, we achieved a lot. We got endorsement from Jane Goodall. She's the foremost expert on the chimpanzees in the world. And we got this amazing nonprofit partner who is in like Colombia. They're Proyecto Titi. They protect this gorgeous one-pound monkey, unfortunately endangered species that only exists in that part of the world. And we are expanding them, Proyecto Titi, to double their size. They have 1,000 acres under them. We're expanding to 2,000 acres. And that costs $1 million to just acquire the land. And so far we have raised $350K for them in these 6 months. We have featured on like many local newspapers and soon to be featured on CNN. So pretty exciting times.
That's very interesting. So what is a carbon credit?
So the world has limited amount of carbon budget. You know, with the climate change, there is globally only X amount of tons of carbon that we can actually emit in the next 20 years. Otherwise, there is a lot of disasters, like you see like the amount of change that can happen in the whole climate system will be a lot more higher, right? So to limit the total amount of carbon that we emit, globally there is a budget every year for the next 20 years, okay? So let's say in the United States, the budget of all companies and all entities, not just companies, that can emit carbon is, you know, total 10 gigatons, okay? So what it means is every company will get a small amount of that budget saying I can only emit this much amount of carbon, okay? So if I go higher than that, what do you do? If you go higher than that, you can purchase carbon from the other company who is probably using solar panels and not emitting as much carbon and have a higher budget. So carbon credit is essentially like currency that you have that you can spend some year, and you can't do more than that. If you want more currency, you can only buy from another company who's not doing it. So in this way, if you are reforesting, consider like a complete reforestation project up from the ground. When you're doing it, the trees as they grow higher, they absorb the carbon, like they do the photosynthesis, they absorb carbon, put it in their roots, put it in the leaves, branches and everything. So over time, as they grow from, you know, small plants to large trees, they absorb a lot of carbon throughout. And they are essentially carbon sinks, right? Because there are other companies like, you know, let's say Google says, I want to be net zero for the next 20 years. But that's not easy because Google just doesn't use electricity. They use gas to cook. When you use gas, you emit carbon dioxide. They have all the Google shuttles which go around the Bay Area, right? And not all of them are electric, and they emit carbon. So for all of this emitted carbon, what they do is they go to these reforestations and purchase those credits, right? So that's how these reforestation projects gets carbon credits, and larger companies can purchase it. And what we are doing here is we are using this money, 100% of that to go back to the forest. So when you're actually purchasing, you know, when you're actually going and selecting these acres and naming it after yourself, of course you're giving money to purchase the land. But when non-profit like organization like Prudhvi goes and reforests this land, they are eligible for carbon credits. ReWorld will help them get them carbon credits, sell them, and the money from them is used to maintain the forest for the next 25 years. You as a donor, you know, this is like a gift that you can give to your like loved ones or someone like that, because you're not protecting it, you're not purchasing the land, you're protecting the ecosystem for the next 20-25 years.
Can you share a life-changing story with us?
The biggest one I can think of is our first partner with whom we are working in Colombia, Prudhvi. They protect this 1 pound gorgeous little monkeys that only exist in that part of the world. You know, they were so good and people were so attracted by it. They started illegally trading it and buying it and like trade and using them as pets. But their whole ecosystem in which they live, the forest in which they live, is very, very rich in biodiversity. But most of that is deforested over the last 20 years, right? Now there are only 6,000 of these species in our planet. And so Prudhvi was established 20 years ago just to protect these species as the sole focus of the mission, right? They have set up their first, you know, biodiversity corridor, a small land, right next to this national park, saying that okay, we'll reforest it, make it for the cotton top tamarins, right? But over time, they worked with the local communities. They acquired acres after acres around them, created this rich biodiversity preserve, which now has more than 600 species and gives a lot of local community jobs. Previously these people who used to work in the forest, right now who are working in the forest, they would cut down these trees, sell them, or use them for other purposes. But Project TT educated them, saying there's a lot more value in protecting them. They run education programs for the kids. They run local employment programs, like, with the plastics of the local area, they make these plush toys which look like cotton tamarins, like very small plush toys, and they get like lot of income for the local women in there. So they included the local communities in here and created this 1,000-acre preserve, right? So we looked at it and like a lot of us look for, okay, I need to create impact in this world, right? Everyone I talk to, my friends, I'm like, okay, I need to work on something impactful. But what Project TT did right there is phenomenal and exceptional, right? And if you can create a technology platform that can accelerate their impact and accelerate impact of other nonprofits like this, that is true, no greenwashed impact that we can create. And the best part of it is we can measure it, right? For example, we went to Project TT. They have this Salta Helena property right next to them, right next to this 1,000 acres they have. We said, we can help you purchase it. We'll create this platform to help you purchase it. And because they have been doing this, they do a lot of field research. You might actually think, what is in there to plant trees, right? But there are a lot of stories even in USA where one invasive species has taken over the whole forest, and the whole ecosystems has changed. For example, in Bay Area, we see a lot of eucalyptus trees. They're not native here. Initially, the people who went to Australia thought that these would be really good for boats here, because it grows really high, really tall. But once they're here, they took over the whole species. They're invasive species, and you got to be really careful on what trees and how you are planting them. For example, Project TT has a biologist team of 5 people who knows what species to plant, how far away you're going to plant them, right? So coming back here, when we expand to this 1,000 acres, so we know exactly what impact we create, and we measure it, right? So we know we're going to plant at least 400,000 trees. We know it's going to protect more than 600 species. We know it can sustain local communities of 125 people for the next 5 years. We know that it will absorb and remove more than 150,000 tons of carbon dioxide, which is like 10 years of annual carbon emissions of Greenland, right? This is a significantly high impact project. All we got to do is to let the world know about this and give them the opportunity to contribute and invest in something like this, right? And that's when you see very clear impact. So we took all that big impact that it creates, and for every acre, we can tell you how much impact your acre and your donation and your dollar can create. And while we created this system, while people used it, the best outcome that I've seen is when one of the families have memorialized their dead daughter. Unfortunately, she died very young. They have created a small acre under her name and protected it. It's more like a forever gift or a forever memorial that you can do for someone you love while also creating impact.
A typical problem homeowners have when wanting to buy a new home is whether to sell first or buy first. Either way is risky. When ready to look for a new home, TradeMyHome.com, powered by Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, offers an upfront guaranteed cash offer on your current home. Are you moving in the next 3 to 6 months? Text PAIR to 408-740-7400 for a free and no obligation professional equity appraisal report, exclusively for Nonprofit Stories podcast viewers. For more information, visit trademyhome.com or call 408-740-7400. Remember, at trademyhome.com, your home is sold guaranteed or we'll buy it.
So what are some of the challenges you and your organization face?
The first one is essentially the time that we have. The second is the market right now, the market and the industry. And the third is the amount of greenwashing that exists for the carbon credit model that we talked about before. So if we come to the first one, the time, one, we're operating on a very tight deadline. The land will be out to the open market by end of this year. So we only essentially had 1 year from the time we launched. So the Santa Helena property, which is expansion of Project TT, it has 1 year, like it is currently owned by a farmer, and we made a deal with the farmer that before you put into open market, we'll use it for conservation, right?
And how much money do you need, you said?
We need $1 million, right? So we have raised so far $350K from all donations, and we have an impending around $350K from grants. So we have a gap of $300K that we have to do in the next 4 months, essentially, right? But we are not working on this full time. We have our full-time jobs. All our founders have our full-time jobs, and we are giving time to this. It's like a second child after the first child of job, right? So there is only so much time you can give to it, even as a team. And all the other people in ReWorld are also volunteers. Everyone, people working at Google, people working in environmental, for the California government. We have a very strong team, but still, time is still limited because everyone is in their own part-time. The second problem that I talked about is the market. We launched at the worst possible time that is possible for a conservation nonprofit, because if it were in 2021, the market is high. I can go to my friends and like, okay, put your $1,000 and get your acre. That's not the case anymore. There were layoffs, and there were layoffs in sustainability teams. There were layoffs in Microsoft, there were Google. There are a lot of times when, especially with corporate partners, we would talk to those teams, they would get the leads, and then the whole team that we talked to, they got laid off, including like the head of the team, right? So we launched at a time when the market was bad. That's a challenge. And on top of it, we adhere to a principle that 100% of your donations go to the forest. We don't use any marketing budget. We don't be like, okay, you give $100, I'll spend $30 of that in marketing. No, you give $100, $100 of that goes to the forest, right? It means all our marketing is word of mouth, organic. We don't pay for any like articles on newspapers, nothing like that. Thankfully, some of our project is, whenever someone hears about it, they get so excited about it. I'm like, okay, I'll actually feature you in our local newspaper. That worked for us really well. But we want to stick to this principle of maximum like $0 marketing spend. So majority of the outreach goes word of mouth and whatever outreach our volunteer team does. Finances is a challenge in terms of getting people to know about us is the challenge without spending money on it. And the third thing is, I talked about how carbon credits can help protect this forest for the next 20-25 years. The problem is there are a lot of bogus credits in the industry. There's so much greenwashing here. Greenwashing is like, you see a product on the table when you go to a grocery store, and then you see this is nature-based, no plants, no animals are impacted by this. But when you see it, they'll upcharge you with like $5 or $6. And everyone started doing it to the point where you don't know what is true or like how much impact it creates. So there is the same thing happened with carbon credits. There are a lot of bogus credits where they say that we'll help reforest or we will protect this land, but that land is already protected. It was already counted for protection in some other areas, right? And they are so low quality like the airline industry started using it. So there is a lot of greenwashing which has hit the carbon credit market, combined with the industry trends that were there. It also got hard for us to first tell to the rest of the world initially that we are not like rest of the carbon credit model. We have the highest carbon credits that is possible for any natural resource based ecosystem, because Project TT has extremely good track record of what they do. They own the land and there are no wildfires or anything in that place. So the carbon that is absorbed is permanently stored with the trees and with the soil, right? So greenwashing impacted us initially, but now that's helping us in another way, saying that we are different than the rest of the market because we have very high quality credits.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, so I think that summarizes the challenges.
So how do you collaborate and network to resolve some of these issues?
Yeah, for the three problems that we mentioned, time, market, and greenwashing. For time, initially we paid contractors from our own pockets, till we launched, and we have to also feed our families and feed for myself. So what we scaled the organization with completely volunteer run. We found people we have gotten really good people who are passionate about the environment, but also have the necessary skills, right? So our head of marketing works in an EV company as a marketing lead in that. So we brought her in and she built the whole marketing team, and they operate for themselves, right? So over time we got in volunteers of around like 20 people. People who are like doing very well in their own professional space. So coming and contributing to actually help the cause of climate change. So that's how we solve the problem of time. The second market, on the problem of market, we flipped the way we have seen the problem. We are now showing the problem to corporates in a different perspective, because for this $1 million of land that Project TT, we are expanding Project TT for, the total value of like carbon credits is around 6 to 7 million, right? So when corporates, when they go in and try to see if there is an ROI on this project that they can go and tell to their clients or customers, the ROI here is so big that it makes like an obvious choice, right? So we have flipped that in the direction that suits well in this market, on like pure ROI, and not just you're doing it for social cause and helping the planet. There's clear ROI here. The third thing on the greenwashing, that's when it worked well for us because of on what principles we have created ReWorld initially, and we started ReWorld. We have put in a lot of time and effort to create very science-driven metrics that will be shown to people when they purchase an acre, right? So, like, to give you an example, I mentioned there is around 150,000 tons of CO2 that will be removed from this project. How did we get to this number? We collaborated with an AI company who has taken in last 20 years of satellite data from the work that Project TT is currently doing, took information of the species that they're planting, the soil, what different kinds of plants they are, how many of them are, understory, overstory, basically like small, medium, large. And they took all this information and they put it in their physics and AI models to estimate this for like the next 40 years, and use that estimation and said, okay, here's how this project is going to give 150,000 tons of CO2, right? And we have put it out all transparently in the open, right? And that helped people to see and get this trust that we are not showing this map with values that we just think are true. We know that they are true because we validated it based on science and the work that Project TT has done before. And that's like one part of it. But no matter what, we're still like a small startup. We have not done this before. You know, we are not experts in this. So we needed credibility. And that's when we partnered with really good organizations, like really successful organizations like Project TT. They have like five-member scientific team. They've been doing it for 15 years. They know what they're doing. They are the experts of the local forest. And we got someone who is, you know, for donors who don't know about Project TT, what is that reference point which says, okay, I can trust this organization, right? And that's when we have put our efforts in to get endorsement from someone like Dr. Jane Goodall. She's not just like a poster child of conservation. She is the world's foremost expert on chimpanzees. Her groundbreaking research is what helped how the social behavior of animals is in the wild. So there is a lot of credibility that comes from that. And over time, this credibility adds. You know, I recently went to Patagonia store. They heard about ReWorld. They want to host us for an event, and we did like a great event with Patagonia. And all of this adds up. And now when we go to a new organization, when we say, now we can say, okay, we are partnered with Project TT. We have Jane Goodall. We have Patagonia event. We have local newspapers come in, and here's what. So it accumulates, and the credibility goes higher and higher. But the only thing to really focus on is to make sure that while doing this, we always follow the principles that we have. Because in the end, we only have one currency, and that's trust. Because that's the currency which is lost in this greenwashed industry.
Worried about the dilemma of selling first or buying first? TradeMyHome.com, powered by Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, has the solution. With our guaranteed 24-hour cash offers, you won't risk owning 2 homes or being homeless. You can buy first and sell later. Are you upgrading or downgrading in the next 3 to 6 months? Text PAIR to 408-740-7400 for a free and no-obligation professional equity appraisal report. Exclusively for Nonprofit Stories podcast viewers. For more information, visit TradeMyHome.com or call 408-740-7400. Remember, at TradeMyHome.com, your home is sold guaranteed or we'll buy it.
What is your vision for next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, so I want to start with a story here. You know, we in the Bay Area, we see these self-driving cars everywhere, right? What does it do? It looks at the road, tries to stay in the lane, and make sure that it doesn't bump into the car before, majority of the times, right? That's the problem we have been solving for the last 10, 20 years. I'll compare it with an analogy. Consider the dragonfly, this small. It's got the brain of the size of a grain. It has 4 wings. It can move forward, go back, dive, swoop. It has 360-degree vision. It processes at 200 frames per second. And it can do all of that without bumping into trees or branches. You know, the comparison is unfair. We have been on the planet for 200,000 years. Nature's got 1 billion years. 1 billion years, right? You can't really compare what progress we have made with what progress nature has made. But all the systems that we created so far, majority of them is inspired from nature. It's the library that we have that we should preserve. And ReWorld wants to be the library where each and every species is a textbook. And we'll make sure like we'll preserve it over time. The problem today is when you want to solve this problem as an individual, like if I go back 20 years ago or 30 years ago, you have to be a billionaire, right? You have to be someone like Muir Woods or Rockefeller to even afford to say, you know, I care about the planet and I want to protect it. How will you do it? You put your money and purchase this large pieces of land, and say that I will never ever use it for like any commercial purposes, and I'll use it for conservation alone. As an individual, you can't do that, right? So we want to create this trusted platform for anyone, anywhere in the world to go donate their money or their time to create this biodiversity hotspots of the world and protect our nature. You know, every single species can teach us something that we haven't thought about before, because nature's got simply billion years, and we didn't have so much time to, to try out so many different possibilities of solving the same problem. And our goal is, in the next 5 years, we're going to protect 20,000 species and establish 2 parks, one in each continent. So just like Project TT in Colombia, you'll have in every continent 2 parks that is protected and preserved and expanded by ReWorld. And in the next 20 years, chances are very high that within your own country, you'll go to a ReWorld park, camp there, and feel happy that this is something that you've contributed to with your time or with your money. And you can see the impact right in front of your eyes.
So what advice will you give to other nonprofits out there?
Yeah, I would broadly categorize into 3 large things. The first thing is know your strengths and weaknesses, and collaborate. And the last one is stick to your principles. You know, when I started ReWorld, I was this ambitious, enthusiastic, overly optimistic person who I can do anything to create an impact in the world. And without that naivety, I would not have started. But over time I realized there are a lot of things that I'm not at all good at. Leaving me, there are a lot of things as a team our organization is not at all good at. That could be marketing, that could be that could be like doing a strategy for like corporates. But the first thing is to accept that and really look into yourself and be honest. Which of the things in your organization is something that you need help? And that goes next into like collaborate with others to seek for help in like the right places, right? I can give you an example. Like we have ReWorld is completely volunteer run right now, with people from Europe, US, India, Pakistan, some in like Africa, working as like a core volunteer team on different things. And we initially faced like a lot of challenges in running this fully remote volunteer team, and we reached out to work on climate, which is also fully remote. Helps if you want to do a job in climate, it will help you find that job. And we went there, we talked to the heads of the organization, saying what worked for you, what didn't work for you, can you transfer your learnings with us and share with us. That collaboration in asking for help essentially helped us a lot to not make the same mistakes and not like burn our fingers and then learn and then do it. So that is like very crucial, which helped us like come so far. And the last thing I would say is sticking to the principles. There were times when, when the market is down, there were layoffs happening everywhere. And that's when like me and my co-founder didn't have enough money to put in back. And there are 2 ways to go about it at that point. Take a percentage of the donation to fund the organization. But for the first project in Project TT, we promised 100% goes to the forest. and we cannot back our word in between. Sorry, market condition has changed. That's when we adapted to the situation and be like, okay, for this pilot project, let's build a team completely based out of volunteers and do what we can to make it possible. We still have very few contractors whom we pay, but majority of them is volunteer run. And that is very key to stick to your principles, because it's very important that you keep your promise to all the stakeholders. Let it be donors, let it be the nonprofits, because over time they all accumulate and create the trust that is very much needed. I talked about how greenwashing is a big problem. And if you're talking about principles, you cannot be one more organization which just writes principles on its webpage and cannot adhere to them. So yeah, those would be my 3 advice.
Thank you so much, Prudhvi, for taking time with us today, and let's stay in touch.
Absolutely, Sharat. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity with Nonprofit Stories. I really enjoyed this a lot.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's time for our trivia question to win prizes. This section is hosted by our AI host, Kay.
Hi, this is Kay from TradeMyHome.com, powered by Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty. Your home sold guaranteed, or we'll buy it. Here is our NPS trivia question. Which landmark legislation, passed in 1964, prohibited discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin? And your options are: Civil Rights Act, Americans with Disabilities Act, or Voting Rights Act. Again, your options are Civil Rights Act, Americans with Disabilities Act, or Voting Rights Act. Winners will get a $25 Amazon gift card and recognition in our next episode. Submit your entry on our website, trademyhome.com/NPS, or by scanning the QR code on the screen. Only the top 3 correct entries will win.
Thank you for listening to the podcast and acknowledging the impactful work of nonprofits in Silicon Valley. Please subscribe and share this episode with a friend. Thank you to our sponsor, TradeMyHome.com, for their community commitment and for making this podcast possible. Until next time, remember to support local nonprofits.